Just in time. Am true. And it's funny, actually, you're here at the beginning of stream because I am a bit late, and I apologize for that. I am fighting something, and it's made me a bit slow. But regardless, what we might have is a little bit shorter of a stream today. Just to let you know, we've got some very important things to talk about. And my hair is being wacky. I don't know why. We're gonna talk about the mass shooting today that happened in Buffalo, New York. Because right now it is... There's a lot of stuff being said about it. Because after every mass shooting, there's a lot of stuff being said about it. And not all of it is important. Not all of it is true. A lot of people want to jump to all sorts of conclusions. They want to use it in any way they can to reinforce their bias. And it's a lot more complicated than usually a right versus left issue. It's more complicated than a gun rights issue. And I would argue that the most important part of any mass shooting is never talked about, or at least talked about very little. In fact, people openly resist wanting to talk about it because it gets in the way of their political ideology and point making. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to cut through the crap. We're going to get down to business. What's up, Tech Roo? What's up, Noob? What's up, Doc Pickles? Waukesha Christmas Massacre. We're going to talk about a lot of this stuff today. For sure. Sea of Red. There's nothing I can say about that, Red. That it's going to sound right on this stream. I feel horrible. I think it's meds. I'm on the... Oh, I'm so sorry. Mintats, that sucks, man. It's 104 in the upper plenum today. Howdy. Dude, I am so tired of Texas heat already. It's not even technically like... It's technically just the very, like, the smidge beginning of summer, and I'm already like, I don't want to go outside. I'm a cold weather man. I'm a cold weather guy. I don't want to... I don't like the heat, which is weird. I'm like from an island. You would figure that I'd be used to it, but there's islands, whenever you live on an island, you at least get a sea breeze. You know? And without that sea breeze, like, you're just standing in humid heat here in Dallas. Like, it's ridiculous. I don't want to do it. I want to stay inside. I want to crank the AC up to, like, 65. You know? If I could make it snow safely in my house, I would. I would. I'm already over summer. Whatever you guys up north think of summer, I down here in Texas, I don't want it. I'm over it. We're good. I don't need it. I'll say it. Why everything about the shooter all over the media, it's what he wants. Well, one thing that I try to avoid in my reporting, Mintats, is I try to avoid saying the guy's name or posting his picture. For that very reason. I don't want mass shooters to get any fame on my regard. But that said, I do think it's important that we talk about the mentality of the figure itself. Because if you're really going to crack the mystery on why someone would do something so evil, you want to get inside their head. So I want to treat these people in particular without personalizing them. I want to make them look like objects. They have abandoned their humanity, in my honest opinion. So I have no desire to speak their name. Although I will say that their name might appear on the stream. It is through no doing of my own. I just want to make that. Like, it's not me trying to report the name. It's usually in reports. So I try not to say the name. That's kind of my modus operandi when it comes to reporting on mass shootings or talking about them. I do not say the shooter's name. I do not want him to garner fame. I do not want him to... I want him, the person, to be forgotten. What's up, Susie? The Waukesha parade killer was swept under the rug. Yeah, it absolutely was. I'm hearing the gunman was a furry. I'm not convinced the furries with guns usually shoot empty in self-defense. I have not heard one thing about him being a furry. Not one. I don't know if that's being circulated. The moment that it becomes there's evidence showing for that, I'll take that into consideration. But I know furries, Techru, and you know, I don't know many who would go on shooting sprees. We got blasted with heat last week. This week we get actual spring weather, highs and lows, low 80s. Yeah, see, we're hovering around the 90s up here, and I'm over it. I'm done. I can handle heat. It is the humidity that kills me. In Dallas, that's the problem. We have humidity, but like, there's no sea breeze. It's just like humidity that hangs out and sits. I don't like it. I don't like it. I love being a Texan, but you got to be tough to live in Texas, because if the heat and the humidity don't kill you, our animals will. Or the pollen. The pollen will get you too. I'm working inside a giant air conditioner. I'm just in the hot side of it. That's a big complaint about St. Louis, and it's valid, but I'm willing to suffer through it. I'm a warm weather gal. Spring and summer are my jam. See, I'm a winter guy. I'm a winter. Get me in the middle of like a mountain with snow on it, and I am the happiest guy you've ever seen. Mass shooters are just crazy. Enough said. The way their brain works is broken, so it doesn't matter what they think about society. They are nuts. Amtrue, you kind of cut to the quick there. That's kind of what my take on it is, but we're going to get to that. I want to go over, because here's the thing. I think that there is an interesting attraction to certain ideologies. I do. These people seem to have an attraction to specific ideologies. Now, I think that there is an important thing to discuss there, but do I think that it is the final thing that we need to discuss? No. Not even by a long shot. Can you boost your output volume at all? You know, man, we have had audio issues, and I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to try something here. Oh, it requires a restart if I do. I apologize for the low audio. Hang on, let me see if I can't just turn it up just a tad. Because I don't want to peak too bad. Is that a little bit better? Am I coming in a little clear? Try Nebraska next to the river. Why is it everything that I would dream of? Was born in the desert and I like it warm, not so much humid. It's the humidity that can kill you, dude. The humidity is just brutal, especially here in Dallas. Ugh. I live in New Mexico. I now understand the meaning of siesta. My preference is to exist in an environment that is nearly perpetual 70 degrees. So you want to go to California. From what I understand, California has its own heat problem, I guess. But I don't know. I heard that in California, it's really nice. We went to San Francisco in the summer at one point in time. And it was cold. I thought that was really interesting. Humid as heck. I hate humidity. I know, I'm from an island, it's weird. Why would I hate? Oh, you'd figure I'd be used to it. But I'm just not. I'm just not. The sea breeze is what really sets it off. What's up, half-baked and bearded? Okay, good, Doc. Good to hear. All right, let's dive into this because I think it's very interesting. I want to go through Tom Elliott on Twitter. He's the founder of Grabian. Did something very useful. He took everything that this kid wrote and he put it in a series of tweet threads. I'm going to go through this tweet thread so we can see what this guy believed. Because I think I think a lot of this is important. And I think we're going to go through this and then we're going to analyze the background issue. The issue that links all mass shootings, which, as you guys have probably guessed by now, is the one thing that many people don't want to talk about, and that's mental health. This kid was clearly sick. Now, you can probably guess that already, just strictly by the fact that he walked into a place and started shooting up innocent people. Clearly, there's something wrong with the guy. And people don't want to talk about it. Or at least there are people who do, but there are people in the media who don't want to talk about it. Politicians, activists, they don't want to talk about it. many of the Twitter influencers, the blue check marks, I know I'm one of them, but many of the blue check marks on the left don't want to talk about it. They want to make the conversation about whatever their chosen political pet is, their pet issue, as you would. Nothing personal to the Cali peeps watching, but even if Cali met the requirement, I wouldn't want to live there. Me either. Not grew up. Out buying mouse traps to keep my neighbor's cats out of my vegetable garden. mouse traps to catch a cat. Or at least trap the mice. Oh, no, because they might eat the mice. That's a rabbit hole. I just mentioned 3 animals in like 1 sentence. All right, so let's check this out. Here's what we can begin with. Let's begin with this thread. Apparently, according to Tom Elliott and the guy that he pulled from, we can see this kid's mentality, his inner thoughts. He made it no mystery as to what he believed and what he thought, why he did what he did. What you're going to see is an odd mixture of arguments. I shouldn't say arguments. You're going to see an odd mixture of hatred for things that typically would upset both sides. We're going to say that. What's up, Badger? For the one, the kid chose his place of attack. And I want to address this. Redacted has the highest black population percentage zip code, and it blah, 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 blah. And it isn't that far away. Plus, New York has heavy gun laws, so it would ease me if I knew that any legally armed civilian was limited to 10-round magazine or cucked firearms. I replaced the name of the city to Redacted because I prefer that the FBI and local police don't know until the attack is started. After the attack, can somebody switch it over, please? Okay. First off, we can tell that the guy is racist. Obviously, he's not making that a mystery at all. But I think it's very interesting. 2 things here. One, the language that he's using, cucked firearms. Cucked is one of those words that has existed now for some time. It used to be really popular back in 2015, 2016. The word has kind of, it's almost a dead meme at this point in time, but people still use it from time to time. They typically use it on 4chan. And as you'll find out, this kid was a very big fan of going to the poll on 4chan. He knew 2 things. One, he hates black people. He hates minorities. And he knew where to get them. He Googled where they could be, like when it would be like when the most black people would be in one location, which he chose. This is the Tops grocery store. And he knew that he could go to New York, any place in New York really, and know that if he were to show up, he could outgun almost anyone there because New York limits them to a 10-round magazine. Meaning that he has a much higher chance of accomplishing his goal than they have accomplished theirs of taking him down. And I want to make it very clear, this kid is living in New York. Many people are saying that the issue is a gun control issue, that they should be buckling down further on firearms. This is clearly not one of those cases because it was the lack of firearms that attracted this guy. It was the lack of anybody presenting any real threat to him that attracted him to where he was and what he wanted to do. So this isn't about gun control. Let's just I hate the fact that the moment a mass shooting happens, you have a bunch of blue checks, you've got politicians, you've got activists coming out of the woodwork to make it a gun control issue. I hate that. The bodies hadn't even gotten cool yet before they're out here going, well, you know what the real problem is? No, it's not the real problem. Let me stop you there. It's not the real problem at all. Clearly, the real problem is that people did not have a way to fight back effectively. This kid knew that. That's why he chose the location that he did. Moreover, you'll notice that many mass shooters choose these kinds of locations because they know that they are going to be absolutely successful because everyone else around them is going to have trouble fighting back. It's a one-sided thing. It's one of the reasons mass shooters are actually so successful. It's because there's no one there to really fight back. From time to time, you'll see someone fight back who has a gun. Thank God for them. The one thing that we need to understand about our country is that we have gunpowder in our foundations. This country is a gun culture. It absolutely is. And that's not a bad thing. It helped us stay as free as we are today. And you're not going to get rid of guns. They're here. Getting rid of this whole idea of a gun-free America that the left likes to push on us is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. You do not have the power, nor, first off, you don't have the authority, but you don't have the resources to go from place to place to place to place, home to home to home to home. You don't have the time and the resources to go out and search every place to find every single gun. And moreover, even if you were to do that off, even if you were to pull off making guns illegal, and you had the authority and the power to go from place to place looking for guns, you would not find half of them. Because most people here in the United States are not going to give up their gun. They're not going to. Gun-free America is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. But you'll notice that many Americans do not have an issue. Many armed Americans do not have an issue with going out and using their very legal firearms that they obtained legally to kill people. It is not an issue in the United States, despite the fact that many of these people want to make it one. That's not how this works. Here it was the lack of firearms. So let's keep that in mind. It's not a gun control issue. Well, you know what? No, I take that back. It is a gun control issue. They try to control them too much. He was an individual legend in his own mind. Definitely an individualist. You think this manifesto is a Fed plant? I don't know about that. It doesn't read like one, in my opinion. And I've seen a few, and I think it's because I've met people like this before, back when I was in school. Given, thank God, no one shot anybody, but I've seen people who really believe this kind of stuff before. I've met them. I've met them in school. I've met them later on at various meetups for certain things. These people truly believe what they believe. Yes, we need more gun control. The good people should have had more guns in their control to fight back. Exactly, Walter. Exactly. After Waukesha, we need SUV control. See, I think it's really interesting that they want to blame the object. Many people on the left want to blame the object, not the person behind it. Waukesha is one of those instances. Now, in this instance, they're purposely trying to avoid talking about the person who is driving the SUV. But I think that we all need to remember that a thing is a thing. It is an inanimate object. An SUV only sits there. It just sits there until someone starts it up, gets behind the wheel, presses down the pedal, and starts controlling it. A gun is an inanimate object. It cannot do anything until someone picks it up and begins using it by pulling it, like loading it with bullets and pulling the trigger. The idea of blaming the object is frankly silly. It's a silly thing to do. A knife is a knife. It just sits there until a person grabs the handle and begins using it. And this goes for everything. Screwdrivers, axes. My dog's teddy bear is just an inanimate object until he picks it up and starts trying to tear it apart, which you have a real problem with that, bro. Whatever happened to the guy in Vegas who shot up a concert that disappeared? I actually have no idea. That's a really good question, Amtrue. Really good question. You have a guy clearly needs help and is growing up in a society that tells him he, a right straight male, is the enemy. At this point, he either embraces his self-hatred or rejects the accusation. I actually think that that's a very good point, Doc Pickles. In an unstable individual, this inflames his already existing issue and results in acting out. We have a country that has never been more divided since the election of Barry. So I think that it's interesting that you bring that up. I want to talk about that a little bit. We have a very nasty problem in our society when it comes to addressing mental health, especially for men. Men, if you try to reach out for help, be it your significant other will, especially in toxic relationships, they'll almost get angry at you for having a weakness, for being sad, for being, angry of some kind. If you try to reach out to friends, you can only really talk about it so long before they start to consider you mentally weak and they start pushing you away because you're too much trouble. Men have a very hard time getting mental health help in this country. Because our culture doesn't really value the mental health of a man. And I think that's one of the contributing factors sometimes to these mass killings. And as you'll see, because I'm about to point this out, this kid was clearly disturbed and people knew it. And in fact, he went in for psych evaluation at one point in time in 2021. And I'll point that out here in a second. I'll talk about that. That would not end well for trying to confiscate guns. No, it wouldn't. It absolutely would not. The moment that they try to start confiscating guns is the moment that this government finds itself involved in a civil war. The shooter was referred to mental health for help, I believe, before this happened. Yeah, in 2021, he was. He had made general threats, and authorities had come and picked him up, and for a day and a half, they kept him for a psych evaluation for his mental health, and they let him go. And I'm not clear as to what they discovered or what their course of action for it was, but I mean, if you look, because we'll also go into this, if you look at the way that his peers talked about him, this kid was clearly, he was a little deranged. The first gun control laws on this continent were in the colonies. When Indians attacked churches, they passed a law that required parishioners to bring guns with them to church. They did, and the attacks ended. Funny how that works. Funny how, people who can defend themselves properly don't get attacked. Is there anything to the statement that parts of his manifesto were copied from White Church event? Yes. This kid is a huge fan of that guy. Huge fan. The terminology just doesn't sound like it from that guy. It does if you've ever gone to 4chan. Some of the stuff that he says sounds right out of it. Right out of it. And he is a big fan of it. But I'm not one. It's very interesting too, because I feel like if it was a Fed thing, Half-Baked, I kind of think that it would be more geared toward one side and not another. So I'm not particularly convinced that it's a plant of any kind. Anything's possible, but I just don't think so. I was in Littleton, Colorado the day after I was working. I personally think all responsible, able adults should carry a firearm when out and about. I think it would be good. I think that more guns are the answer, not less. Don't punish good people for the acts of madmen. My rights do not depend on the acts of the criminally insane. Exactly. It's not, the majority of people do not. There are, okay, think about it this way. There are millions and millions and millions of gun owners in this country. Have been for a long time. If we actually did have a gun issue in our country, a mass shooting would be a maybe 2 to 3 times a week thing. There'd be a lot more dead. This isn't a gun issue. I just want to I want to wipe that out immediately, because a lot of people are just immediately pointed that way. I want to wipe that out. It's not a gun issue. I believe the FBI wrapped up the Vegas shooting with stating a clear motive of the shooter. It did kind of just fall off, though. Effectively, personal responsibility. Personal responsibility? Yes. That's why they hate Christianity, self-responsibility. You are responsible for your own actions. Yes. I think that's one of the reasons they hate Christianity. I read your article, VIP member too. God bless you. God bless you. Be sure to sign up for the VIP program at redstate.com. By the way, everything I'm about to talk about is at redstate.com. Go follow along with me and sign up for the VIP program. Promo code Morse, M-O-R-S-E, gives you a discount on sign up. It really helps us out. Really helps us out. Also, if you use promo code Morse, it helps me out personally. Well, it seems the last 2 years we saw a lot of people just lie down as their freedoms were taken. I think that I don't want to get too stun locked on this, but in order for Americans to go along with blatant authoritarianism, you have to appeal, oddly, to their rebellion and an us versus them mentality, or you have to scare them into it. Otherwise, though, I mean, you'll notice that over time, you know, when people started to really learn the truth, they started to actually rebel, and people started to move states. They started to move to red states. You know, they spoke out about it. I mean, it was. I think that I give the American people a lot more credit than they probably would normally get. And I think that the COVID thing really taught us some things about the American people. One, that we can absolutely be fooled into compliance. We can. But once we learn the truth, or once we get over whatever trend is happening because people come up with good arguments against it, and those arguments spread, people tend to, that rebellious inner part of our American spirit comes out, and we tend to push back. Mass shootings are a daily thing in reality. Over 700 dead in Chicago, 3,000 wounded, injured. Go figure. Hey, we don't talk about Chicago, Amtru. We don't talk about that. Chicago was an amazing gun-controlled place. What are you talking about? Get out of here with that Chicago argument. He right, though. Shh, Amtru. We don't talk about it. That was 1 year in Chicago. Isn't that, it's pretty sick that we actually don't address the issue in Chicago. And that's also something that we could actually have a very long conversation about. People are still being given proper motivation. Almost anyone will believe almost anything. I think that I'm getting stun locked. I need to focus on this. But I think that we as a species do not yet understand how to handle the internet, because we will literally see something on TikTok or Twitter or something like that, and we'll believe it without really questioning it. And we have to learn that on the internet, anyone can say anything, which is good, but we have to have the personal responsibility of understanding that not everything we see needs to be questioned. That's the bottom line. Everything we see, everything we hear needs to be questioned until we get further evidence. Because, I mean, there are people out there, good point CNN, who will literally just spout something. They'll type up a headline that absolutely has no basis in reality. And people will immediately believe it. All right. Buffalo Killer says he's a fascist, racist, and proud anti-Semite. So I think he had like a Q&A or something. The shooter created a Q&A and he just kind of filled it out himself. Are you a fascist? He said, yes, fascism is one of the only political ideologies that will unite whites against the replacers. Since that is what I seek, calling me a fascist would be accurate. Are you a white supremacist? Yes, I would call myself a white supremacist, he wrote. After all, which race is responsible for the world we live in today? I believe the white race is superior in the brain to all other races. That takes a lot of Olympic level gymnastics, mental gymnastics. America, for one, is literally the creation of a bunch. I've talked about this, I think, in a different episode of RSL. The America as we know it today is a creation of many different cultures coming together and putting stuff in until we have what we have today. We are the most successful nation in the world based on many different factors, but one of them is the fact that a lot of people from a lot of different places, a lot of different cultures came in and added something to it. Some level of brilliance. We've had social thinkers who have changed the way we think about things that come from all different races. underneath America is a vibrant idea factory. And one thing that I'm very adamant about saying is when it comes, if you really want to create the future society, the successful future society, you can't have just one culture calling the shots, because one culture is just going to continue to recycle the same stuff it always did. People develop habits, they develop traditions that they almost fear breaking away from. So sometimes you need other ideas to enter into the arena, and those ideas become something better for being introduced into a public sphere where other ideas are being introduced. And we take the good, we leave the bad. We make mistakes, of course. Things change. But to say that whites alone created the United States and that, we created society, not true. I mean, you can go back in time and look at all these cultures who had their heyday, and we still use some of the stuff that they used back in the day. Or the ideas that they used back in the day. It's not purely a white thing. To say it is cherry picking. It's cherry picking history. It isn't just Chicago, though. Philadelphia, Kansas City, D.C., Atlanta, they all have the same issue. They are the murder capitals of the world, but there is a common theme amongst all the cities. I think the common theme at this point is you have leaders who are soft on criminals for one reason or another. I can't follow this kind of manifesto. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I understand that his words mean, but try living with all that crap in your head and make it jive. Wow. I think it's very interesting that you have this kind of thing happening right here, and the fact that he is, like you just said, trying to keep this all in your head. It would drive one crazy, and I guess it did. Are you intolerant? Sure, the last virtues of a dying nation are tolerance and apathy, and I want none of it. Are you anti-Semite? Yes, I wish all Jews to hell. He said, dude, when it comes to the Jewish people, like he starts typing in all caps. Go back to hell where you came from, demon. But in reality, a Jew confined to Judea where he can't spread his people or beliefs is of no concern to me. This dude is basically just saying that he's a Nazi. Without saying that he is a Nazi. He actually calls himself a National Socialist at some point in time during this manifesto, which is Nazism. Are you a conservative? Okay, so let's take a look at this. No, conservatism is corporatism in disguise. I want no part of it, he said. Are you right-wing, depending on the definition? Sure. Are you left-wing, depending on the definition? Sure. Are you a socialist, depending on the definition? Worker ownership of the means of production? It depends on who the workers are, their intentions, who currently owns the means of production, their intentions, and who currently owns the state and their intentions. So he's not a conservative. That's the other thing that I saw. Well, he's clearly a conservative. He's a Nazi, so therefore he's a conservative. First off, that's a really stupid thing to say. That is a stupid take. Because conservatism and Nazism are diametrically opposed to one another. It blows my mind that in 2022, in current year, we still have people out there trying to paint conservatives as Nazis when conservatives have given every single, since the age of Lincoln, every single indication that they are against Nazism. I know back in the day, like the Lincoln era, they didn't have, but I mean, like the idea that we are not for racial supremacy at all, that we want a free market, small government, like all of this stuff is completely antithetical to Nazism. And yet you still have people, these blue checks out there. You still have these reporters and these activists and these politicians on the left talking about, oh, he clearly he must be of the conservative ideology since he's a Nazi. That's try hard. That's so try hard, bro. Put that down. It's done. It's so tired. It's so tired. In the entire history of the Republican Party alone, All right, we have views that do not line up with what Hitler believed. Period. There's no Nazism there. And it's stupid for people to think so. Among the many misdeeds of the British rule in India, history will look back upon the act of depriving the whole nation of arms as the blackest, Gandhi. It's interesting what happens whenever you take a populace's ability to defend themselves from the government away. It's a story that we time and again seem to have to learn. We have examples living among us in the world right now on both the micro and macro scale. What would happen if the people in Venezuela or the people in North Korea, China, what would happen to these governments, these authoritarian these total dictatorial governments, if the people all were suddenly given guns and they said, defend your right to be you and to live as you wish? What would happen? Interesting thought experiment. How many people would rise up and say, no more, I'm done, I'm tired of this? Viva la revolution. What's up, Brandon? It's almost like someone wanted to make absolutely sure that this shooting had the correct bad actor to press all the right buttons before midterms. Again, I don't necessarily believe that this is a plant. I just don't. I think it's interesting that, of course, look, I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I'm really not. I like to have facts and evidence. Is the timing a little weird? Yeah. But this kid clearly had a very bad history. People know him. People are witness to it. And I've met people like this kid before. Someone asked earlier about the New Zealand killer. I would prefer to call myself a populist, but you call me an ethno-nationalist, eco-fascist, national socialist. There it is. If you want, I would disagree with you, or wouldn't disagree with you. So he he has a lot in common with the New Zealand killer, this kid. Before I begin, I will say that I was not born racist nor grew up to be racist. I simply became racist after I learned the truth. I started browsing 4chan in May 2020 after extreme boredom. Remember, this was during the outbreak of COVID. He says that he works alone. He's not a member of any organization or group, though he says he supports many. Buffalo Killer hates libertarians, falsely claims it's largely pioneered by Jews. On Ayn Rand, the developer of the philosophical system she named Objectivism, wrote several books espousing her ideas, promoted laissez-faire capitalism, individuals, and property rights, and related sometimes. Although opposed to the overall concept of libertarianism herself, her character, as well as the ideas she put forth, are generally associated with the modern libertarian movement. So he just put all this together. So he is very anti-libertarian. He emphasized New York's gun laws, explaining how he chose his location. Also note the choice of gun was meant to elicit a media freakout. He said, the AR-15 and its variants are very deadly when used properly, which is the reason why I picked one. High-capacity magazines and ammunition that causes enough ballistic damage to kill effectively will be used. The AR-15 is readily accessible even in cucked New York, and after some modifications, will be able to effectively kill. Plus, the media loves to hate on the AR-15, which may increase media coverage and public outlash. He's using the media's own willingness to freak out about AR-15s in order to get them to cover all of his stuff. He wrote a letter to conservatives. He said, ask yourself truly, what has modern conservatism managed to conserve? What does it seek to conserve? The natural environment, Western culture, ethnic autonomy, religion, the nation, the race? Nothing is conserved. The natural environment is industrialized, pulverized, and commoditized. Western culture is trivialized, pulped, and blended into a smear of meaningless nothing, with the only tenets and beliefs seemingly held to are the myth of the individual, the value of work, productivity for the benefit of your capitalist owners, and the sovereignty of private property, to ensure none of us get grand ideas of taking the unearned wealth of our owners. I think it's very interesting that this kid seems to reject all of this stuff that conservatives hold dear. Yet he's a conservative. He's right wing. Ethnic autonomy destroyed in the name of cheap labor, whilst they may publicly object to the illegal immigration of third world masses. Privately, they push for as much migration as possible. Anything to decrease the labor costs of production and line their pockets with the profits. They remove the European people's autonomy and sovereignty for their own lust for power and wealth. Religion, what remains? Empty churches and full shopping centers. Drive-through confessionals and no-fault divorce. Any religious ideal that stood between the wealthy and wealthy generation was downplayed, sidelined, and quietly dismantled. Also, they could line their pockets without complaints or objections. The nation? What nations do we have to conserve? What are our own nations now based on? There is no shared culture, ethnicity, language, values, and beliefs. Anyone can be a member of our nation as long as they have the paperwork. They need not be born here, share our race, our language, our culture, or our beliefs. Here the conservatives cry, as long as they are willing to work, let them in. Let them earn our wealthy benefactor their second yachts and their fifth properties. The race? They don't even believe in the race. They don't even have the gall to say race exists. And above all, they don't even care if it does. It's profit and profit alone that drives them. All else is secondary. The notion of racial future or destiny is foreign to them as social responsibility. So he doesn't, first off, he both misunderstands conservatism. I can speak good. He both misunderstands conservatives and conservatism. Only the left is really super concerned about race. Conservatives typically are not. We only actually bring race into the subject whenever we are talking numbers and facts. If we see a crime problem and we note, like conservatives aren't afraid to note, okay, let's in a certain area, it is the black population that is primarily the cause of, or I should say the perpetrators of, a certain amount of crime. But conservatives are smarter than race. We don't just see a race and go, it's the reason that it's because they're black. No, we go, okay, what are the outlying economic factors? What are the social factors that are causing this to happen? Only the left focuses in on race and truly makes it a massive issue. Whenever you have a culture like America, holding on to a certain ethnic culture is just impossible. And that is okay. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that cultures need to disappear. What I am saying is that you're going to have a mixture of ideas, just like I mentioned earlier. You're going to have a mixture of ideas, and those ideas that come together are either going to be rejected or accepted by the general public and adopted based on how useful and good they are. America is just the natural progression of cultures sped up. It's really all it is. I do not believe in the segregation of cultures. I think it's unhealthy for a culture. I really do. Whenever you have a culture that is completely cut off from everyone else, it stagnates. It begins to believe its own BS. Doesn't like Atlas Shrugged, go figure. I read Atlas Shrugged. It's really good. China would have a big problem if magically the citizens had firearms. Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Conspiracy theories are like 17-0 since Russia came. You're not wrong. He says he's a populist in that post on the screen. Can I think of any populists that were racist? Hitler. Yeah. This kid is a straight up Nazi. I mean, he fell in love with Nazism. He thinks it's like the way to go. And there is also there's also and I'm going to go into this right now, actually. If you really want to see the rest of this, it's up on redstate.com. I linked to Tom Elliott's thread here, and you can read through the entire thing. It's pretty nuts. He plagiarizes the New Zealand killer. He really thinks the New Zealand killer was like a superhero. But Tom Elliott's thing is really good. I think it's also interesting. I'm going to go here and Joe Cunningham, or I'm sorry, wrong one. Joe Cunningham wrote this, and I think it was really interesting. And it kind of leads me into my main issue. And it's one that we really need to speak about, because all of that stuff that we just talked about, it's interesting in the way that it shows you Nazism can attract some weird people. It attracts those who are mentally unwell. But mentally unwell is the bottom line problem here. We have witness testimony from his peers. They spoke to peers, and this kid's just weird. He was weird. He growing up just strange. I'm going to go ahead and read this. The problem isn't hate speech or social media in general, which is exactly one of the other things that people are trying to turn to and say, well, it's social media and hate speech and all that stuff. It's not that. Again, billions of people get online and use social media all the time from all around the world. Millions, did I say billions? Millions of people all over the world get online and use social media, and you would be surprised at how many of them do not go on mass shooting sprees, if you were to believe these people on the left who are trying to reach for an excuse. It's not social media. It's not guns. It's not video games. The idea that this is somehow any other thing than what it is, it drives me crazy. They rarely lead to physical violence on the part of the racists using hate speech. I realize that given the raw emotion of the moment, it's difficult to nuance policy wishes on such things, but it's important to understand what's going on. Our children, and despite being 18 years old, the supermarket shooter is still emotionally and socially a child, have turned to various social media platforms to find their community. In the vast majority of cases, it's harmless. Just kids going online looking for acceptance. In a growing number of cases, that need for acceptance is causing kids to do more and more things we would consider problematic for that acceptance. And that's absolutely true. That is true. This is one of the more extreme examples, but you'll find that many people, they join a community online and they want to participate in said community, so they start to do things that would garner them acceptance. One of the biggest issues, in my honest opinion, is Instagram. Many girls want to be viewed as, an important, beautiful, attractive, well-loved person. And so they go to great lengths to become so. So it's not that social media doesn't have an effect on the people. It absolutely does. I think that humanity, like I said earlier, I think that humanity still hasn't really figured out how to deal and live alongside it. We're still in our infancy when it comes to technically learning how to interact with the internet, with the ability to talk to each other with such ease and share pictures and videos. We're still in our infancy as humanity when it comes to dealing with it. I think that it will get better, for sure. Being a racist is just an easy way to be a bully with a reason they think is justified. Look at almost the Black Lives Matter movement was a really good example of that. Social justice in general is a very good example of that. People, they like to you'll never find anyone more racist or sexist than a social justice warrior. These people are so bigoted And yet they try to find ways to make their bigotry seem acceptable. And almost like it's like a defensive action because they're the victims. But racism is a very sad and dumb excuse to be a hateful person, no matter how you slice it. I only bring race into it when someone is being racist, no matter how the race. I personally don't let race matter at all to me. Yeah, it shouldn't matter. I mean, literally, your melanin levels do not make you who you are. They just don't. And I think a lot of people, like we've had time again and again and again examples of how, you know, you have people of varying levels of success of every race. You have varying levels of intelligence from every race. You have varying levels of cleverness, charm of every race. Boiling it down to, well, you know, my race is smarter because X, Y, and Z. Bro, you've already lost the argument. Because history says otherwise. We have so many examples of every person from every race being something that blows our minds in a good way. Racism is stupid. It's so stupid. Back in the 40s and 50s, children took on adult responsibilities at an early age. Life was hard and challenging. You could die from almost anything then. Kids these days don't have that perspective. No, they don't. I was actually thinking about that just the other day. It's funny that you bring that up. I was like, man, today we have like people my age getting anxiety attacks over having to go to a bank or a tax office or some sort of government building just to like get, I don't know, their car registered. You know, they like start to freak out. And I'm like, you know, back in the day at like 8 years old, you had kids going to factories. You can't stop being the color you are. You can't stop people from being racist, but you can stop being defenseless. Amen, dude. That's a good quote. What you're kind of describing is the classic. Hard times make strong people. Red, right on, dude. That is exactly what I think is the issue. We've got it so good. We've got it so good. Back in the day, like here I am complaining about how I don't like the heat. You know, at the beginning of the stream, I was like, I hate going outside when it's 90. Yet there are people back in the day who were 100% living inside homes while it's like 105 out. Fanning themselves going, well, better get back to work in the cornfield. Like, come on. I'm such a wuss compared to these 8-year-old kids who used to go and work in like these dangerous factories back in the day. We all are. Racism is a phobia. Racism is a stupid thing. Kids back then were having children by 16 years old, and that does not happen much now. Kids are coddled for the most part. Oh, absolutely. Life expectancy was 50 to 60 years old. Now people live to 100. The one thing that I have noticed is like have you noticed the lack of hobbies? I don't want to get stun locked on this. You know what? We'll talk about that at a different time. I just think it's interesting that like very few people know how to work with their hands anymore. A school official. This is very interesting in my opinion. And this is what makes me think that, you know, this wasn't just some plant or anything like that. A school official reported that this very troubled young man had made statements indicating that he wanted to do a shooting either at a graduation ceremony or something after a government source told the Buffalo News. After police looked into the account, the shooter was referred for mental health evaluation and counseling. Classmates said that he often acted strangely at times and espoused extremist views on politics. Last year, one former student recalled the shooter wore a hazmat suit to school for a week. She believed it had something to do with protecting himself from the coronavirus, but she didn't rule out the fact that he was making a joke. It was the most extra thing I've ever saw him. That is such a Gen Z thing to say. It was the most extra thing that I ever saw him do, a former classmate who asked not to be named said. There were other indications of the shooter's fragile mental state. during a class exercise in political class in which the students created their own countries with the government of their choice. The shooter's pick, was an autocratic regime that the classmate described as Hitler-esque. His views were extreme, the student said. You could pick any form of government that you wanted, and he picked a totalitarian government. And that lines right up with what many of these people believe. It appears that rather than a political extremist, this is a kid who fell through the cracks. Remember, he's only 18 years old. When the pandemic began, he was just a kid. A kid who, with issues whose life, like so many others, was turned upside down, especially when it comes to the social and emotional learning and health. In his reported affiliation online, if his reported affiliations online are accurate, there is reason to believe that he was indeed radicalized. Sites like 4chan are cesspools where online rhetoric is concerned, though they themselves are not actively trying to recruit people to join neo-Nazi cults or the like. You can find users there who are. I want to say this about 4chan because a while back I went there, and I did it a few times just to see what it was about. And the stuff that they post on 4chan's not exactly a moderated place. Very little moderation happens there. And to be honest with you, I'm good with it existing. If I want free speech, that's fine. But if you do go there, there are parts of that site where some of the most vile and disturbing stuff is posted without issue. You will find it's almost Mos Eisley. It's some of the worst people you will ever see are expressing themselves on 4chan. If you are a disturbed kid who already is really deep into extremist ideologies, who is attracted to, dynamic and unfiltered stuff, it wouldn't take much to get someone to believe some of the crap that they espouse there. And this is clearly something that happened. And I want to make something very clear here. I am not for internet censorship. There are many people, if people want to be racist and horrible and they want to express themselves and they want to go to 4chan to do it, go do it. You do you, dude. I'm not one for shutting down speech. I'm not one for taking away people's right to say what they want. And I do not want people to be confused with me saying that this place is horrid and this kid could easily be, or kids like that could be easily manipulated by people on these sites. I don't want people to mistake that as me saying we need to shut down 4chan. Because that's not what I'm saying. Because 4chan it's also not that. It's not all that, But I do think it should be noted. This is a place where people hang out with extremist ideologies, and they are more than willing to convince people with malleable minds about it. It should be noted. That's where they hang out. It's what they do. I hope to make it to 80 years old. Shoot. I hope to make it to at least 55. I don't know, man. What's up, Linda? Yep, my son was coerced into coin collection and fishing. Now he's top of his class, technical engineering, no video games and Pokemon. Video games, in my honest opinion, aren't a huge issue. In fact, I would actually say that video games are a boon in today's society, especially for men. Because, and I don't want to get too into this, but men have an insatiable urge to go on adventures and do things, but in our society today, we have become so civilized and are conditioned away from that kind of stuff that men have to have an outlet of some kind. Video games have provided that. And it's one of the reasons that you see quite a few men. And when I say quite a few men, I don't mean like a handful. I mean gaming is the blue whale of subcultures. It's the biggest one, or at least one of the biggest one. It spans the globe. But you'll see a lot of people, especially men, engaging in video games because it allows them to have that outlet to go on these adventures. It's also today's great storyteller. It went from books to movies, and now it's video games. Some of the best stories I have ever seen came out of a video game. Video games, like anything, if you play it too much, it can be a problem. It can definitely be a problem if you play it too much. I can attest. But I wouldn't say that video games are a bad thing, per se. Like anything, too much of it can be a bad thing, but I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. Has anyone checked the shooter's DNA for, like, obvious Republican genetic alterations? They're tracking everything we say on the chats and Twitter. Why didn't they catch on to the violent person that these parents were raising? So, here's the thing. They did. Buffalo shooter was reportedly put under mental health evaluation after general threat in 2021. I'm glad you brought that up, Linda. As it turns out, Fox News reported that the same shooter, whose name I won't repeat here, had undergone a mental health evaluation for more than a day after he had made general threats to the community in 2021. A spokesperson for the New York State Police said troopers responded to Susquehanna High School in Conklin, New York, to investigate a report that a 17-year-old student had made a threatening statement. The spokesperson did not identify the subject by name, but said there was no target associated with the threat. The state police responded. Gramaglia said during Sunday's press conference, they investigated, they interviewed the subject, and they felt it was appropriate at that time to have that individual brought in for a mental health evaluation. State police did their job to the fullest that they could at the time. Gramaglia later added, he was evaluated and then he was released. As far as when we say on the radar, there was nothing picked up on the state police intelligence, nothing that was picked up on the FBI intelligence. Nobody called in, nobody called any complaints. So they had the kid. He made general threats. And he clearly, if they were investigating and they were analyzing him, clearly they probably had gotten information from outside about him. They've gotten statements. And while they don't say exactly what they did with this kid, they clearly just let him go. So they had him on record. They had him on the radar, as it were. But no one did anything. What did they do? Did they suggest or try to put him more, like give him more mental health help? Because they didn't say that. And that's one thing that I really want to bring up. And this is one of the biggest issues that I have with every single mass shooting that we're not talking about. They want to go off and they want to blame Tucker Carlson. They want to blame the gun. They want to blame Fox News. They want to blame video games. They want to blame everything. Except they do not want to talk about mental health issue. And there's a reason that they don't want to talk about the mental health issue. It's because if they do, they know that people will focus in on it because it is the true cause. And they don't want them focusing on the true cause when they can use that to push an agenda. Never let a crisis go to waste. They could actually use it to push for gun control if they wanted to. They could use it to push the right wing is a racist amalgamation of neo-Nazis, which is not true. This kid, he says it himself. I started with communism, and now I would say personally that I am a leftist authoritarian, national socialist. He said that. He's not right-wing. He's not. But they want to convince the American population, well, this is all because conservatives are racists. And white supremacy is infectious in this land, and Donald Trump. Yes. They want you talking about everything but the mental illness issue. Everything but the mental illness issue. But this kid was clearly disturbed. He had mental problems. They picked him up in 2021 for mental health reasons. He had made a general threat. He was on the radar. His classmates knew that there was an issue. He was attracted to extremist ideologies. This might sound like I'm sympathetic to the shooter when I say this, but did anyone try to help the kid? Did anyone try to sit the kid down and be like, hey, let's talk? Let's try to... And I'm not just talking about shoving pills down his throat. I'm so sick and tired of that. Did anyone try to sit down with the kid and really talk to him? Connect with him? Did anyone try to get to the bottom of why he feels the way he does? Did anyone try to psychoanalyze him more than just, well, we need to figure out a day and a half's worth of, we spend a day and a half trying to figure out if he's mentally ill. Yeah, he's mentally ill, bro. Did anyone try to get under this kid's skull and possibly try to even him out? I'm not saying that I have sympathy for this kid, but I think that this could have been prevented. But again, we don't really discuss mental health in this nation, especially when it comes to men. And the only time, or anytime someone does try to bring up the mental health issue, especially in this case, it's dismissed immediately because it has no value to the activists, to the journalists, to the politicians. There's no value for the mental health conversation. To the race baiters. And I do think that there is something to say, especially in their culture nowadays, when it comes to white men. They're constantly viewed as the bad guy. This needs to be said. When it comes to the white male, the white men in America are consistently targeted as the villain. We are mustache-twirling villains, according to mainstream culture, according to many journalists, activists, politicians. It's white men are the issue. You had people on CNN straight up saying it. You had, I think it was Don Lemon or Chris Cuomo, one of those two idiots, who was sitting there saying that white Trump supporters were the number one terror threat in the nation. Not even remotely true. So imagine that you're a kid who is messed up in the head like this kid was. And you see people turning against you and your gender, your skin color. And over time, you find a community who says, hey, no. They're idiots. They're inferior to you. You're great for being white, for being male. You're awesome. Everyone else is the inferior one. And he gets seduced by these people. And this kid who already had mental health problems develops more of an identity around himself, and that includes, when it comes to these ideologies, a hatred of others. Because there always has to be a bad guy when it comes to these kinds of dangerous ideologies. There's always a bad guy. With Nazism, it's minorities and specifically Jewish people. And this mentally ill kid gets so seduced by these people, and he goes out and he does this. It could have been prevented. But we don't talk about the reason behind it. We don't talk about solutions for it because it has no political value. I don't blame the parents, but definitely should have been aware that he needed help. Absolutely. The same thing happened to the Parkland shooter. And I think there was another shooter, and I can't remember exactly where he was, but that happened too. All the evidence was right there. Authorities had him on the list. They had picked him up before, and they did nothing to help him. He actually, the Parkland shooter, from what I understood, actually reached out. Excuse me. And had asked for some help. And apparently didn't get any. And they kind of more or less ignored him. And he was also mentally disturbed. We don't talk about that. He was clearly mentally disturbed. The left and the right is a racist Voltron. The left is using this kind of narrative to push a civil war. In my honest opinion, I really do not want to see that happen. No one does. But there are people who at least no one sane does. But I'll venture to say this. You'll have many radical leftists today that are completely and totally accepted by the mainstream culture. But they're just as radical. They're just as radical. Given they're not shooting anybody up, but they are showing up to cities and towns, burning down buildings. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there have been deaths. But they're destroying property, beating people up. These people are extremists, and all of them trace back to having some issue. Have you ever seen an Antifa lineup? If you look at the Antifa mugshots. Look at these people. These people have all sorts of just weirdness about them, dude. Something ain't right. Something ain't right. This guy's got makeup on. Their hair's all weird colors. This guy's shaved around the middle of his head. And it's all just very odd stuff. These people look like they have been through some serious stuff in their life. Something turned them into weirdos. No one wants to talk about their mental health. No one wants to discuss yet these people are extremists. They are. They go out, they destroy, they harm. But they, just like the kid, went out and they found a community, a group, these mentally disturbed people, they found a community and a group that told them they're right, they're awesome. Or at least in the Antifa thing, you're horrible, you're bad. But in order to not be bad, you need to do what we do. And they fell for it. And they end up doing extreme stuff. What would happen if this, what would have happened to any of these people? This guy right here. What would have happened if someone had gotten to him first and had talked him down from all of this extremist ideology? Had actually connected with him as a person? Or this guy, would he be wearing makeup and destroying stuff in the street? Destroying other people's property and burning down buildings? If someone had actually spoken to him and evaluated his mental health and tried to get to the bottom of why he feels the way he does? Extremism doesn't just come out of nowhere. It starts, in my honest opinion, with a mental health issue. That is the bottom line. Can go many different ways after that. But that's where it is. Those aren't natural hair colors. As it turns out, people's hair does not just... It's not... Does anybody else think it's weird that this guy he's got neon blue on one side and red on the other? And I can't help but think of like... I can't help but think like, bro, you're kind of giving like a shout out to the cops. I don't know why. It's just like this just makes me think of like cop lights, like police car lights. I don't know why. What is the quote? If you treat people like animals long enough, they begin to act like one. If you tell people long enough they are the cause of all the problems, they start to act accordingly. Absolutely. There's this one... There is a really interesting line from the Joker in the comic The Killing Joke. And he said, we're all one bad day from becoming him. And I believe that, actually. I think that he is very right. I think that at some point in time, it could be in your past, as a kid or something like that, or even just recent, something so traumatic happens to you that it throws you off into some sort of mental spiral. Britney Spears, in my honest opinion, is a really good example of this. I think that she suffered many bad days. And now look at her. She's one of the most famous women in the world, grown adult. She's got a weird mentality of, I want to say, she reminds me of like a child, like an 8-year-old child, maybe 9-year-old child. Something happened. And it makes you think, what happened in many of these people's past that brought them there? I think we should be able to find that out. And maybe it is something as simple as a mental, like a chemical imbalance. That's possible. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's an actual issue that they had. Something happened to them. Something happened to them that brought them to a group of people who fed on their mental weakness, their mental instability, and tried to provide them with some sort of outlet for it. By the way, reminder to like today's stream. Yes, please like the stream if you haven't already. It really helps out this with the algorithm. Quite a few of them are also groomers and pedos as well. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What causes someone to become a pedophile? I would like to know. I think it would benefit society to know that. How do people go out and present themselves dressed that way and think it is normal? The issue is that they don't care. It's abnormal and they want that. They want to be seen as abnormal. I'm not one of you. I'm different. I'm woke. She needs lots of help, Brittany. She got messed up. Oh, big time. Those looks are an attempt to draw attention to them. Yep, exactly. At the end of the day, I think it really is all about attention for these people. At least Antifa. Thanks, VW and Cindy, for dropping by. Guys, that'll do it for me for today. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Please go to redstate.com. Everything that I've talked about today is on the site. Please like the stream if you haven't already and subscribe. Really helps me out. Join up with the VIP program. Lots of great stuff in the VIP program that you don't see on the front page. You can use promo code Morse to sign up. And if you're looking for just a cool hangout, non-political, we're just shooting the crap, go to my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/themorse-code. It's we just have fun, hang out there, play games, talk about nonsense, get our minds off of things for a while. But thank you guys once again. Enjoy the rest of your week. Again, smile, you're winning. And I will see you guys on Wednesday at noon EST. Be here. And if you want me to talk about something on stream, I'm more than happy to. Follow me at TheBrandonMorse on Twitter. My DMs are open. Give me your ideas. Thanks again, guys. I will see you guys on Wednesday. Peace.